trying to figure out which one is my seat. This one is my seat.
I think he said.
Every time I sit on the air, I bump my leg.
Yeah, he didn't want people looking into it. He stayed quiet. As soon as he opened his mouth and started looking into it. Yeah, he was squeezed back.
I was telling him every time I sit right here, so this is bump my leg. Okay. Okay. Good evening.
So we do have a quorum, so we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I hope everybody has had a great month since the last time I seen you. Almost a month. And so I'm excited to be here. Dr. Mullins will not be here today. He's away with family. And so, for the most part, me and Christina will be managing this meeting. And so we will start with the roll call as I call your name. Say aye. Dwayne Barton. Norma Baines.
Here.
Renata Conyers.
Here.
Christopher Gordon.
Here.
Roy Harris.
Here.
Joyce Harrison.
Present.
Shonda Jackson. Kimberly Jones. Here. Dewana Little. Here. Dwayne McAfee.
Here.
Tamari Macon. Bobette Mays. Linda McDowell.
Here.
Tamara Miller. Mr. Dwight Owens is not here. Mildred Nance Carson. Bernard Oliphant.
Present.
Thomas Priester.
He just walked in. He out there.
Jesse Ray. Dwayne Richardson.
Here.
Eric Robinson.
Here.
Raynita Waters. Cece Weston.
Here.
D. Williams.
Here.
MZ Yehuda.
Here.
Keith Young.
Here.
D. Burris.
Here.
Tiffany Devlo. Shakiki Giles Bayton. Osandu McPeters.
Here.
Well, we have a quorum, and thank y'all for that. So I would like everyone to look at the current agenda, and if you have not already had a chance to review the, well, we don't, our minutes will be,
We have minutes from June 12th and from,
okay, the June 12th and retreat minutes, has everyone had a chance to review those? Does anyone by show of hands need a moment to review those? All right, so first order is the approval of the agenda or amendments to the agenda.
So moved.
Are there any amendments to the current agenda?
Amendments to the current agenda?
Yeah, for tonight.
Is there gonna be a moment for us to speak as commission? It usually is on here, and I don't see that.
So we can add that in, this, not on.
It's not
It's not the same one.
Huh?
The one that was emailed had time for us to speak.
The one in the email did?
I think so.
All right, so we will make that addition. Let's see. So after the presentation of the legacy neighborhoods, then we will have that time for us to have open conversation as commission members.
how much time?
How much time do y'all think we need to put towards that? But, let's see, that'll probably put us at 17.
You could take the 10 minutes to do the summit conversation.
So we're discussing it where again?
Right after the Legacy Neighborhoods, presentations. And so we can add 15, because I think we could probably bring this down. Or that down to 10. So we, have it added for, 15 minutes, right after the Legacy Neighborhoods presentations. So, are there any, concerns with us having that added to this agenda?
You have a timekeeper that's going to keep us to that, so we get that?
Yeah. So, I'll ask for a second for the amendment to
So
the
move with
agenda.
the changes to the.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstaining? All right. The previous, approval of the previous minutes from June 12th and from our retreat. Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those abstaining? All those opposed? All right, so moved.
All right, the next two items are for your review. Just attached the project timeline as a reminder, and really it's just a review item. And then the next item that is up for review is the post-meeting survey. And again, the reason that we include these in y'all's, here you go, agenda packets, and I have a couple of extra agenda packets here too, is so that everyone is able to see all the responses and everyone is able to kind of be on the same page in regard to feedback and just letting y'all know that we're listening and learning from your responses. I did have a couple of responses come in after these agendas were printed, so it looks like on the post-meeting survey, we have 14 responses, but I think I got 2 extra. So in my email after tonight's meeting, I'll send out those additional responses. All right. So do we want to go ahead and move into the legacy presentations? And I'm going to keep time on my phone, and I'll give you a 2-minute warning. And really, these are really informal conversations to learn about the legacy neighborhoods. But we're kind of tight on time, and we want to make sure we hear from everyone. I think you have a question.
So on the agenda it says the updated project timeline. Were we gonna talk about that?
Yeah, I think there's time during the roundtable discussion.
Okay, but we will get to it.
It's a review item.
Okay. I'll address it when we get to the commission being able to speak.
Okay.
All right, our first legacy neighborhood is East End Valley Street. Ms. Renee White.
Put the clock on if I get up there.
10 minutes. I can't say my name in 10.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am Renee White, president of the East End Valley Street Neighborhood Association. And I have my 2 representatives standing with me, Glenda and Keith, for East End. Good evening to everyone, to the commission, to everyone that's here. I say good evening, thank you for having us. East End Valley Street is the oldest and most historically significant African-American neighborhood in Asheville. Once the center of African-American life in Asheville, the neighborhood is connected to the Black Eagle Market Streets and Valley Street, which is now South Charlotte Street, which was the heart of the neighborhood until urban renewal. We also have the YMI Culture Center, which is located in Eagle Market Street. And nowadays, people want to say that the YMI Culture Center is downtown, Well, why my culture center is East End Valley Street neighborhood. It's one of our hub facilities in that area. East End housed almost all of the African American churches, schools, and Black-owned businesses. We are also a part of the E.W. Pearson Collaborative, of which we collaborated with Burton Street and Shiloh. And the three neighborhoods worked together to come up with collaborative efforts that were going on and found common interest and goals in our neighborhoods that we felt we could work together and bring some solutions to. We now have become a hub in East End for developers, white families, and people looking for the Asheville lifestyle. We are currently planning to look at updating our vision plan to address affordable housing, land usage, greenways, parks, and walking trails, not to mention buildings and facilities that could house our neighborhood association and provide some economic development. We have efforts underway to try and slow down gentrification by partnering with the Asheville-Buncombe Community Land Trust, of which I am the vice president, and to purchase homes and properties that will be affordable for Black people to purchase and claim ownership in our neighborhood. We have partnered with the Preservation Society of Asheville to prevent our historic buildings from being torn down, to mention Cappadocia, which is one of our oldest historical churches that was about to be demolished by developers. Thanks to the Preservation Society, Cappadocia Church has been saved. We appreciate their efforts in stepping in to assist us in saving our Black legacy. Unlike the Stevens Lee High School, of which my parents graduated from, I researched to find out why was there only a gym remaining for Stevens Lee High School. I've been told by my elders that they had no idea the school was about to be torn down. I was able to locate information in a handwritten notice that stated, Stevens Lee will be torn down. So the Black community was not aware of the fact that the school would be demolished and all that would be left was a gym, but as you know, that's what's standing, a gym. How can you prevent something from happening, especially actions that are negative, when you don't even know anything about it? That was negative to our community, because that school was historic and Black legacy just destroyed as if it had no relevance at all. We're diligently working to bring East End back to a thriving neighborhood for Black people to live, to work, be entrepreneurs, and have ownership in the city of Asheville and Buncombe County. Our story of Black people owning homes, land, and property needs to be reality and not just dreams. The stories of how Mr. Porter owned a store and a laundromat, how we could walk down the street to Mr. Bud's candy store and buy candy and pickles, how the Hennessy's owned a Black funeral home, how Mr. Jones had a cab stand on Eagle Street, how Miss McQueen had a Black cafe and restaurant, how Miss Jeanette had some of the best fried chicken and fish you ever could eat if you walked on Eagle Street, get it on a piece of light bread with a sliced tomato and some lettuce. Best food you could ever eat. How the Delgado building, now Leaf Global is in that building, was a jumping juke joint for Black people. Yes. But we were able to gather and have a good time. How Miss Rosa Walker had a Black-owned beauty salon right on Eagle Street. And keep in mind, these was all Black-owned and operated businesses. How families looked out for each other. How we bonded as Black people, and how it's all been divided and somewhat destroyed. Our vision of what our neighborhood would look like with reparative justice would include bringing back Black economic and generational wealth. Black people would own businesses once again. Our seniors could comfortably live and age in place in their own homes. Our churches would be the foundation of our legacy as they once were before and as they have been in the past. Black people would and could take ownership for their recreation facilities instead of going through so much red tape and procedures just to utilize them and having a difficult time trying to even do that. We'll be able to set up our own programs and events that we would like to have. Homes that are affordable will be built, and we could use land that is right in our own areas. To mention, we could build our office for East End Valley Street Neighborhood Association, not rent somewhere and use the trunk of my car. Our neighborhood association would be able to reside in that office, and it would belong to us. It would be our community-based building where we could all gather and meet whenever we need to. We'll be able to offer economic stability to college students who leave and never return. We could give them a reason to return back home, and last but not least, they would be excited to come home. We could potentially sit in the front of the bus once again and not be pushed to the back. We could become the head and not the wagging tail, as so many would like for us to be. And we can't even talk about the harms that have been done. How do you measure how much harm has been done in our black neighborhoods? I can't measure that. But I can tell you this. I will put it all in a nutshell. Black people in the city and in our black neighborhoods have been somewhat destroyed economically, physically, mentally, educationally, spiritually, and respectfully, and most of all, humanly. We will continue to work as a legacy neighborhood to fight for what our neighborhoods need, to be the voice that needs to be heard, to talk to city council, to talk to county government, to make sure that we are at the table at all times. This is my presentation for you tonight. Please remember East End Valley Street neighborhood, and thank you. I am Renee White.
Thank you so much, Renee. This has been great. The next community up is Shiloh Community Association.
That was good. That was good.
And that is Miss Sophie Dixon.
So I get extra time for my age. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And Renee, I would just say ditto. This is what Legacy Neighborhood Coalition is about. Yes, I am the president currently of the Shiloh Community Association. Our representatives are Norma Baines, you want to come stand with me? And Bobette Mays, I think, is out of town. But they're doing a tremendous job, and we want to thank you for what's going on with this. But I think we keep throwing out this legacy neighborhood. And I think there needs to be a better understanding of just what that's all about, how it came to be, and what we have is what we've put in place to try to help us going forward. And so what I'm going to share with you today is this little bit of background in the history of Legacy Neighborhoods Coalition. I'm not sure how we got here to be part of this meeting. However, thank you for that. And so that everybody will have a better understanding, I'll read you what we are proposing under that title. In February 2017, Buncombe County Commissioners voted 7-0 to approve the Isaac Coleman Economic Community Investment Grant, allotting $1.5 million over 3 years and creating a learning collaborative for grantees to build relationships and capacities across efforts. The goal of the grant is to rebuild the health, safety, and well-being of our communities through targeted investments in community-driven organizations that has worked, that are currently working toward eliminating racial disparities and to champion equitable opportunities. Recent data has proven that traditional and institutional efforts have not decreased racial disparities in health, education, housing, and economic opportunities. Therefore, community-led strategies should not only be continued, but amplified with equitable prioritization and resources. In 2017, opportunity zones were created. That was a national program allowing for certain investments in lower income areas to have tax advantages. And guess whose communities were made part of that? All of the black communities, Shiloh and all of us. And why would Shiloh be one of those? I don't know. But anyway, we're under that's overhanging over our head. And so when we started looking at that, we came together under, and E.W. Pearson was mentioned, and all of us that were working under the Isaac Coleman. The Legacy Neighborhood Coalition is comprised of neighborhoods that have historically faced racially discriminatory practices, including urban renewal and redlining. These neighborhoods have faced current displacement due to naturally irregular levels of gentrification and an absence of local government employment, community-led anti-displacement strategies in policies and practices. Asheville Buncombe Land Trust, Burton Street Community Association, East End Valley Street Neighborhood Association, Elmer Community Ownership, Shiloh Community Association, and Southside Rising are working together to ensure community-led government in our neighborhoods, to prevent harmful development and find solutions that support legacy residents to remain in their neighborhoods. The Legacy Neighborhood Coalition would like to invite the City of Asheville and Buncombe County to continue to enhance our relationships through the formalization of a Legacy Neighborhoods Commission that will allow us to work collectively and strategically toward standard goals of equitable communities. And so that's what this was about tonight, to keep us in something and help us to stay in place. We've got a great platform under the Legacy Neighborhood Coalition, but that somehow that's got to be maintained. And so because of that, we are now, and I think Brenda Mills and some of our city officials and county have been provided with this request that the Legacy Neighborhood Coalition be set up as a Legacy Neighborhood Commission, LNC, with all of the things that's in place that the City Council and Buncombe County Commissions have authority to establish, the advisory board and commissions, so that the structure is in place. And now we're saying we want to be part of that. So that request is already in the hands of our city and county government. And so now I'll get back to Shiloh. I want to get that in. But Shiloh is, as you know, we call ourselves Shiloh, North Carolina. But anyway, we have coming up with a great event this weekend, September 7th, 9th, and 10th, and we have several annual days, but this we call our historic day. And as I think most people know by now, we were not able to be awarded the Isaac Coleman grant again this time. Fortunately, we did get two rounds of funding, so now we are raising funds, and this is a huge sponsorship program that we're putting in place to raise funds to keep our programs going. But if I don't know if Norma wants to come and do something, I'll give you a little idea about the event, but we are having that event, and it's going to be on your website. I think we've got everything's on the website now, Norma.
Yes, everything is on the website. We are having a gala at the Doubletree in Hendersonville, on Hendersonville Road, which is on the 7th. That is a Thursday, which starts at 6:30 to 9:30. So we want you to come. There will be a silent auction there, and entertainment, and of course there's a sit-down dinner. So we're hoping all will come and support that. On the 9th of September, we will celebrate our historic day at the Linwood Front Shopping Recreation Complex, and that will be from 1 to 4 p.m. Also, with each event, if you would like to take the tour, we will have the tour that's Shine on Shiloh. So we take you to about 12 historical sites in Shiloh, and we would like to tell you about them and see the markers there. Also on Sunday, one of our partners, Spirit Beer, would also be doing a cookout, and that is from 4 to 6, I believe, if you want to stop by and support them. And on that Monday, we will be having a work day, which will be at the Garden, which is 59 Hampton Street. So we hope to see all of you. Also, if you want tickets for the gala, just let us know. They are $50. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the Shiloh.
I want to know who the other sidekick is. I mean, since Bobette's not here, you got somebody new up
This is
there.
my baby. you're gonna be hearing some big things, and I'm really kind of hanging on to that till we get all the plans in place. But we are bringing our young people on board, and she's gonna have a major part to play in what we're getting ready to put out about the Shiloh program. Thank you, darling.
Her name is?
Her name is Shaniqua.
My name is Shaniqua Samuel. I'm the oldest granddaughter of Moses Samuel, who was the president before Miss Sophie. And so I'm stepping into his role a little at a time. I help coordinate the Shiloh Community Garden, and I'll let Miss Sophie tell my new position whenever she's ready for that. But I also, you may have seen me on Carolina Kitchen. I own Change Your Palate. It's a nutrition program for people who are high risk for type 2 diabetes and hypertension.
So,
Thank y'all so much. So, North Side, Mr. Bernard Oliphant, East Chestnut, Heart of East Chestnut, wanna,
On behalf of the North Side and the Heart of Chestnut, I beg your permission to sit here. I've also talked to Commissioner Connors. Renata, go ahead, I've talked to Ms. White and several other people. As Commissioner Young indicated, in order to help give us more time, the Heart of Chestnut will partner with East End to help develop an economic center and training center that takes care of her office. And I simply say, in the words of Psalms 133rd Psalms, behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell in unity, cooperate and graduate.
Amen. Thank you.
That's it.
Northside community. So we will go to Southside United Community, Mr. Roy Harris, Miss Mildred Nance, Carson.
Keith, that's 10 minutes.
Anybody from the South Side want to represent it? Come on up.
I want to.
Well, Nick, I know that you had to present later on. You're a big part of the South Side, so come on. Okay, let's go. My name is Roy Harris, and here to represent the South Side. Not only the South Side United, but sort of all of the South Side. If y'all want to introduce yourself.
Cece Weston. Olympia Garrett, but most of you know me as Gwen Adams. Priscilla and Jai Robinson.
Robert Hardy.
Dee Burris.
Monique Pierre.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being a part of this, and thank RJC for inviting people to come and also participate. Thank you to the city of Asheville for starting this process some almost 3 years ago, to Buncombe County and to all of the processes and all of the ones that helped to get this started. I have on Africa hat today. And one of the things about this Africa hat, I went to Africa about 5 years ago. And when I came back I said to myself, I have no reason to complain. And then the reparation process started. And I realized I do have a reason to complain. Because what I saw in South Africa, I started to walk the streets of Asheville, and I start to see the same thing, and some of the same things happen here. To our absent Chairman Dwight Mullen, and thank you for your steadfast commitment. I can imagine the sleepless nights that you spent, even though you're not here, trying to keep us in line and trying to keep us on task. To the reparation members, thank you for your commitment to stated process and whatever. 40 years ago, I arrived in Asheville, about to get married and start a family. Asheville has been good to me and my family, but, and more about the but later on. I want to pay homage to our ancestors that came before us. I heard someone the other day complain that it was too hot in here. And I got to thinking about, how about a 90 degree day picking cotton, cucumbers, beans, all of those vegetables. How would you have felt then? Our ancestors, a lot of them, one of the first jobs they had when they came to this area was picking beans. Some don't want to talk about it, but that was a livelihood for a lot of people that came from South Carolina, across the mountains and everything to Asheville. Well, why am I here? I've just returned from a trip that I would never forget. I just returned from a trip to the South Side. Now I come back here at Harold's Cherokee Center to see if I could get some of y'all to come go back with me to the South Side. South Side is not hard to find. You just go down Biltmore Avenue, and when you get to Southside Avenue, you turn right. Once you turn right, don't worry about that the street runs out and changes name. That was done on purpose. They rolled the street up because they wanted nobody to go to the river. Now what are they doing? Trying to figure out how to get traffic down to the river. Well, I see some of you decided to come. Come on. Get on the bus and go with me. Now we have one of the best bus drivers in Asheville sitting outside waiting. Dwayne, go crank the bus up. Go on, crank that bus up because we're headed to the South Side. How many of you going? Now I know that some of you are not going, even some Reparation Committee members. You could care less about the South Side. And I've gotten that sentiment from some of you, but I do. I'm willing to die for it. I am willing to put everything I have on the line to help maintain the South Side community. Now, you're on the bus. Let's go on. Well, let's go and stop over at the Eddington Center. And as we get at the Eddington Center, wait a minute, just before you knock on the door, I just want to tell you that in the Eddington Center are now the Grant Center. You're going to find a lot of things. Well, one of the things you'll realize is that the South Side neighborhood is being chopped up little by little by other neighborhoods. Gentrification is running amok. Redlining has a devastating effect on us. On my street, there's only 5 or 14 of us that are left that are African American. And the oldest one is Barbara Pagan, I think is 87 years old. So the writing's on the wall. Other neighborhood associations are invading our territory. Crime is on the rise. And don't get Brother Hardy and Miss Priscilla talking about the urban renewal. They have been here and told us about urban renewal, and you know some of the things about it. I think we need to invite them back again so that we make sure that we understand what urban renewal did to us. Well, we've been here now, it's time for us to go back to the center, get on the bus. But wait just a moment. There's some things that I want you to see. Just one more thing, please. We have 4 parks in our neighborhood. We have one creek, 3 branches that run through the south side. We have a watershed project, a south side community farm, a grant center expansion that just opened last weekend. We have next generation people. And in fact, there was a young lady that is walking around right now. She is starting to learn from her father and from us the reparation process. Just because she's walking around as a child, do not think that she's not listening to what we say. She is. She's listening to every word that we say. Well, we're back at the Reparations Harris Center. But I just want to close by saying, as James Brown sang, we don't want you to give us nothing. Just open up the door and we'll get it ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Southside United Community.
I got a question.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. My name is Renata.
Was it for the Southside community?
Yes.
Okay. Roy, it's a question for the Southside community.
So, and I'm learning as I go. Where does the south side start and where does the south side end?
Ends at the river, starts at the
Well, if you listen to Mr. Hardy, Priscilla, you think the south side, in my opinion, started at Hilliard and Biltmore Avenue. And it went all the way down to the river. And now we're carved up in just a little piece of it, which we call the Southside United Community. But all of that was Southside, because nobody else wanted to live down there. Nobody else wanted to be there. And so now we have the South Slope, West End Association, and the South French Broad neighborhoods. So slowly we're being pushed further and further into a corner. But if you keep pushing us into a corner, we're coming out fighting.
I don't know if I'm saying this, okay, where does it cut off at? You just said that, does it go anywhere like down Hendersonville Road or how?
It basically goes down Biltmore, take Choctaw, go over to Depot Street, and back around up Klingman, on this side of Klingman,
Okay.
back to Hilliard Avenue.
That's, okay. Biltmore?
Biltmore. That isn't the neighborhood, but that is what we traditionally call the South Side.
Okay. That's.
Priscilla, you want to define that more? Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Our next community legacy neighborhood presentation is Stumptown. Rashida McDaniels, Thomas Priestett, and Ms. Kendra.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us. We are excited to share about the Stumptown community this evening. If there are any Stumptown residents that are here that would like to stand or raise your hand or come up and stand with us, please do. Ms. Dixon back there. Thank you for being here. Thank you to all the legacy communities that have spoken so far and sharing your stories and what you are doing. We appreciate you and appreciate the work that you all are continuing to do here in Asheville to help remind us and to keep reminding us of where Black Asheville has been, what it's been through, and where we're going. So tonight we will share some history and just some other information and some future information about Stumptown.
Hey, good evening. Thomas Priester, representation of Stumptown. So we're just gonna share a timeline, and you can also find it on the city website as well, for the community of Stumptown. So first off, we have around 1880, 30-acre tract in Asheville near Riverside Cemetery was cleared for black resident use, called Stumptown. The area attracted many black families who came to Asheville in search of work. They formed a dynamic social network and created a good, respectful community of homes, families, neighbors, and friends.
Stumptown residents found employment in Riverside Cemetery, at nearby Battery Park Hotel, or with affluent whites on Montfort Avenue. By the 1920s, Stumptown's population exceeded 200 families. Although there was much poverty, residents had treasures money could not buy: pride, dignity, and self-respect, and most of all, love.
Urban renewal came as a total surprise to us. We heard bits and pieces about a new program that promised better living conditions, and then remembers Miss Dorothy Ware. One day, my parents got a letter warning them that they had only a few months to find a new home. Other residents got similar letters. Where would we go? How would we get to work in church? If it's urban renewal, why is eminent domain being exercised? What's really going on here?
In the 1960s, in the aftermath of the Crosstown Expressway, as urban renewal swept through Asheville, Hill Street, and Stumptown were experiencing issues due to systematic neglect. For example, Stumptown was one of the last communities in Asheville to be connected to regional wastewater systems. A 1968 article in the Citizen Times described a group of Stumptown residents complaining to the city about inadequate sanitation services. Like other historically black neighborhoods impacted by urban renewal, black homeowners were prevented access to resources for upkeep, and white landlords allowed properties to fall into despair. During this time period, some black families moved from Stumptown and Hill Street into Hillcrest Apartments, rental units opened by the Asheville Housing Authority in 1959, accessible only by a bridge over the new expressway.
Stumptown residents experienced roots shook repeatedly over the next 2 decades. As our homes were bulldozed to the ground, one by one, and the social order was broken, by the early 1970s, little was left. Scattered, hurt, bitter, discouraged. We strove to build new hopes. In spite of the devastation, the strong values of our old community are visible in the successful lives of our young people. Stumptown lives on through them.
In the 1970s, in 1971, the city of Asheville hired Ray Kasai as director of Asheville Parks and Recreation. A plan had been made for a recreation park which would cover a significant part of the footprint of Stumptown. Orlean Simmons, a Montfort resident who worked for Model Cities, organized community support for the center, of which she later became a much-loved director. The city of Asheville acquired property for the project during the 1970s, over 80 families lost their homes. Kasai combined federal grants from programs including Model Cities, the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and Housing and Urban Renewal Development, HUD, to pay for the $1 million plan. The groundbreaking was held in 1977, and the center was dedicated in 1978.
Stumptown was a vibrant, closely knit black neighborhood located in the hollow under the brow of the hill. between Riverside Cemetery, Pearson Drive, and Cortland Avenue. It had active churches, stores, and community cohesion. Early residents provided the labor to build the Riverside Cemetery, worked as domestic in white-owned Mumford houses, and in-service jobs in hotels and restaurants. Black residents today still call their neighborhood Stumptown, though urban renewal and gentrification have thoroughly eroded what was once a thriving Black community.
Some important facts you need to know. Members of Stumptown want to be recognized and heard about the harm to their community. They would like to have street signs throughout the landscape where Stumptown used to be.
And on July 14, 2020, the Asheville City Council passed Resolution 20-128, supporting community reparations for Black Asheville. In October of that same year, passed Resolution 20-184, which put a hold on selling any city-owned properties that came from urban renewal until a reparation commission is formed and policies are put in place. The context of these resolutions, we believe that the Montford Park Players Robertson Amphitheater lease renewal process should be paused, or the lease to be renewed for no more than a year, pending recommendation from the Reparations Commission about this and other city-owned properties in Stumptown. This is not an appropriate point in the reparation process for the city to be locked into a long-term lease agreement on a property acquired during urban renewal. The commission and impacted Black families should have to propose ways to leverage the property to benefit Black, the spirit of Resolution 20-128, March 2022.
There are 22 properties on Jersey and Morrow Streets in Stumptown that we want to be included in the harm study by the consultant firm hired by the Reparations Commission.
Stumptown residents will continue their partnership with Tempe Avery Montford Center Association.
Other future plans are they will have a legacy family reunion strategic meeting in October 2023 to discuss an informal association and the next steps of preserving history and community signage and involving legacy family members to help develop a yearly plan for Stumptown and Montford residents. Since there is no Stumptown neighborhood, reparative justice would be for the city of Asheville to recognize the harm caused by urban renewal in the city of Asheville and give Stumptown legacy community members the option to decide what happens with city-owned land in Stumptown with the support of the Reparations Committee, the Hazel Robinson Amphitheater, and the 22 city-owned properties.
We had a slideshow that we wasn't able to get together for you all tonight, but we can share those with Ms. Edwards to share with you all later. And for that October meeting, we are meeting October the 21st from 3 to 6 at the Montford Center. So that's a time just for the neighborhood to members to gather, and you all are welcome to come out.
Please do share your presentation, and then if you had slides that you were going to share, please do share that copy with me so we can enter it into the record. I want to make sure we don't miss anything. You shared a lot of details. That goes for everyone that presented. If you had a presentation that you're reading from that you can make a copy and share with me, I would love to have that so we can go ahead and put it in our meeting minutes.
Thank y'all, Stumptown, Legacy Neighborhood presentation. So now we will have the Asheville Housing Authority, Miss Monique Pierre. Hey, how you doing? Welcome.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Don't worry, I'm not going to stand up here by myself. And those of you who know who you are, please come, including our commissioner, my colleagues, and if there are any residents of the Housing Authority, City of Asheville, please feel free to come. I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but I think it's very important. So, first and foremost, I have to tell you the several levels of discomfort that I felt when asked to come present this evening. Because who am I to speak for Legacy Communities when I am brand new to Asheville, and while I have family roots in North Carolina to some extent, I felt very out of place. But then I remembered something. I remembered that we're all part of a larger experience. And that when my parents got that letter about you're going to move out of your home because of urban renewal, that letter came to my house too, several thousands of miles away or a few thousand miles away. And I understand that we all have a collective impact to make. And when I took on the role of the new president and CEO of the Housing Authority, I took it very sincerely. And I do understand housing. And I thought, well, a roof over our head, that's something that we can all relate to. And so I would just like to talk a little bit. Oh, first, let me just also beg your forgiveness. If I say something that maybe seem as maybe offensive or out of keeping with what you have gone through already, please understand, as being new to the party, you may have already danced to a tune I want to sing. So, but I'm going to speak from the heart. So the first question that was posed to us is, are there any current planning efforts underway in your neighborhood or community? Well, having the Housing Authority of the City of Asheville under my leadership and the leadership of our fantastic board, of which Mr. Harris is a member, and I understand redevelopment. Housing is something that touches every single life in this room. Housing authorities were developed and created in the late 30s, early 40s, and they were built in order to be in, up, and out, to help for the economic advancement of certain people. Oftentimes they were built in some communities as veteran housing for veterans or wife or widow of a veteran or the families of veterans. And oftentimes they were also built as a place to put people when their neighborhoods were torn down. They were hyper-segregated, oftentimes isolated as, for example, Hillcrest, as you previously heard, isolated by just one way in, one way out. Well, over the last 40 years, housing has slowly begun to change. We've gone through empowerment zones, promise zones, every type of zone you can think of, choice neighborhoods, and there's a great movement of redevelopment. And what comes with that are the resources. So the Housing Authority of the City of Asheville is looking at all of the resources that come into this community that have something to do with housing and how they touch the work that we do from this housing and urban development. We want to make sure that when those resources are available, that they're able to be applied for quality housing, for redeveloped communities, meaning that we will at some point look for how do we redevelop the housing in conjunction with other city and county efforts. It can't happen alone. We have to have input from the community. I was in a meeting about transportation the other day and the reconfiguration of Patton Avenue. And I understand the intersection between transportation and housing and how vital it is that those things are coordinated when being redesigned. And one of the things that I said when I came to the table and understanding that critical nexus was, well, are there going to be people employed or companies that are employed that are living in the communities where the redevelopment is happening, where the new highways are going in? Are there opportunities for ownership and not just give me a job holding a stop sign? And a comment was made to me that, well, how many civil engineers do you have? And I said, you don't know what we have until you ask. And if I have to send somebody to college, which we do through some of our programs, to make sure that we have a civil engineer when it's time, we'll do that too. Because I understand how to wield the resources at my disposal. I understand that there are opportunities for education through the Eddington Center, through our PODS program, through Chosen PODS, I should say, and PODS program, through our Family Self-Sufficiency program that Mr. Priester works under with Mrs. Jackson. And I understand that we have, if I pay over millions of dollars every year in rent to landlords, and I say to you, where's the ownership? The ownership is in the hands of the landlords that I pay for people to be able to live in their properties. So when I think about our commitment to redevelopment, I think about home ownership. I think about how do we use the vouchers that come into our program that pay those landlords and use them for our home ownership program that Mr. Robinson runs, where that voucher can be used to help pay for your mortgage every month for 15 years currently. And we just requested a voucher through HUD for it to be, I think, 20 years? 20 to 30 years, so 30 years? 30 years. So we just requested a new waiver, which means that we can use our housing choice vouchers that come into the community to pay someone's mortgage for 30 years. These are programs that are available. I don't know why they can't be duplicated. Okay. And so we're also currently pursuing redevelopment and looking at the quality of the housing stock that we currently have. So we have D'Iberview Community. In D'Iberview, they've begun a process called Reimagine D'Iberview. But what I think is that we have to look deeper at the resources available. And so we are interested in pursuing Choice Neighborhoods grants, both planning and implementation. We're looking for ways to bring more community partners to the table when we talk about redevelopment and what it can look like, what it should look like, and what the community wants it to look like. And that goes for all of our communities. That's Piscaview, that's Hillcrest, that's D'Iberview, that's all over. Am I leaving anybody out? Southside. Livingston, Erskine, Walnut. I told you I'm new. Our hopes are to add partners and shift gears to a Choice Neighborhoods reimagining initiative, and also an implementation grant, which it comes with a planning grant, which we intend to pursue, and then also look for ways to get to the implementation grant. And so it usually is about a year or a year and a half process of planning before you get to the next implementation grant application. The second question, what are the stories that we need to know about our neighborhoods? Well, I can't tell you all of those stories yet, but I'm learning every day when I'm walking and talking with members of the community and I'm understanding their lived experience. So I won't dare try to tell any stories today. One of the things that it also asked was share your vision and how you would describe your neighborhood legacy, or excuse me, share your vision of what your community would look like with reparative justice. This is where I excel, imagination. So first of all, you've heard everybody talk about housing and home ownership. Home ownership is possible. It's possible to design housing and build it, and it doesn't have to cost $1 million per house or $500,000 a house. There are ways to design and innovate around development that will allow us to build the houses that people can afford and build them with modern means and utilizing great economic as well as environmental concerns. So we have environmental justice to be concerned with as well. I believe also that there should be no strings attached opportunities. Oftentimes you'll hear folks talk about home ownership with 40 years affordability, 30 years affordability. I think that when it comes to reparations and when it comes to home ownership, there shouldn't be any strings attached. I should be able to build a house, sell you the house, and you do with what you will. That is real autonomy, the ability to move as if you just bought it, fee simple, and not tied to a trust or a land trust, which, no offense to the land trust folks. Oh, I have a 2-minute warning. She didn't tell me that. Okay. So I also believe that there should be protected class benefits that should flow through lending institutions. I've seen examples where lenders who want to do business with city, state, or municipal local government have to offer, through the Community Reinvestment Act dollars or in other ways, they have to offer lessened criteria. So instead of screening people out and saying, well, you can't get a mortgage because your credit score is only 600 and you need 620 and it's going to take you 3 years to get to 620. Look for ways to screen people in, like lowering some of the thresholds for entry that oftentimes have barred us from actual ownership. I also believe in education. We have the Eddington Center and we're looking for ways to strengthen that, developing potentially a one-stop shop, so that the initiatives that we are going to be pursuing within the Housing Authority, that there are resources for residents, so that I don't tell you, well, you have to have a job. I say, here's a one-stop shop economic development center where you can come and learn about ownership, starting a business, etc. We're also looking at what harms should be addressed. When I think about the economic harms, I think about psychological harms. There's a psychological harm to poverty and for that people experience communally. There's a book that I like called My Grandmother's Hands, and it talks about generational harm and how your body holds a memory. I think there's another book, The Body Holds a Memory. And our bodies and our mental health need to be addressed at the same time. We need resources that allow folks the opportunity to grow together and to learn how to overcome the pain. There is harm that comes when you are harmed that is deeper than just a new home. I also met, when I was a teenager, I met a woman, an African American woman, who had built her own hotel. She had like a franchise through, like, I think Clarion Hotel or one of those hotels. And I was astonished, and I just kept picking at her, like, tell me, how did you do it? What did you do? What is that? If you are living in an area like Asheville, then you need a hotel. If you want to be part of the economic fabric, you need also opportunities. When they talk about permanent sources of funding, and I know I'm at my 2 minutes, but I'm going to keep going. When it talks about permanent sources of funding, then we have to look at the entertainment taxes. We have to look at the hotel taxes. And we have to say, where are there permanent sources of funding for some of these initiatives? When you look at what's happening across the country, it's very important that we protect and secure sources of perpetual funding for the initiatives that we choose to pursue. Because when Dara Maxwell was born in Ash, not Asheville, but Ash, North Carolina, and with her husband, and they raised their children, they didn't have the same opportunities that other folks had. And so it's important to understand the long term, if you're in it for the long haul, that when seasons change, opportunities don't evaporate. And so, lastly, I think that it's really important that you all give me a call. And when I say give me a call, I mean it. I want to make sure that if we're leaving anything out that we're missing, we're not understanding. I know that I have a dynamic staff, and they have made sure that our communities are not forgotten. But if there's something that we need to do and you're concerned, then you need to reach out to me. My email is mpierre, P-I-E-R-R-E, at haca.org. Email's the best way. I'm not going to give you that phone number because that light is blinking red all the time. And lastly, what I would like to say is that the Housing Authority wields a lot of resources, and a lot of folks don't even understand. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, reach out to me. We have monthly commission meetings. Our next commission meeting is going to be held at Altamont Apartments on the 23rd, starting at 6 o'clock. We have a work session starting at 5 o'clock. We have community meetings throughout the year, and we are very intentional about the work that we're doing. We will wield the resources at our disposal to the tune of millions of dollars for the benefit of Ashevilleans, and we want to make sure that you know that we're here. So that's it. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, someone has a question for you.
There's a question.
In reference to the Arthur Eddington Center, also known as the Reed Center, also known as Livingston Street Elementary School. They received funding from the government, from HCC, to renovate this center into within the community. There was a stipulation in that grant that Housing Authority would have to hold on to the property for 10 years before they could sell it. Are there any plans to sell that building?
Absolutely not. What we have some dreams and hopes, and we want to make a permanent investment in that center. And so we're looking at ways to enhance it. There will be changes. I can't deny that. There are some spaces that are poorly used or underutilized. There's renovations that need to take place once again, and we're willing to do the work to make sure that that happens. We're working with folks. We have the public schools are there. We have other folks that are there, and it may be time for some changes, but we're willing to do the hard work and have the hard conversations. But what we can commit to is that our children, over 133 children, was it a week, attended the summer program? 133 children a week attended that summer program. During the school year, children attend Head Start at the Burton Center right behind it. As you know, we have a community farm. We're not going anywhere.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I'm just gonna say something. I have never been in a room with this woman. I've never met this woman. Whoever hired you, God bless them, because I'm gonna say this. You speak my language. You speak directly to my soul, especially what you're talking about with home ownership and housing choice vouchers, everything that you stand for. I hope your words match your deeds, but I am gonna say this. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this. Based on everything that you've said, and I've never really said this about anybody in public, protect this system. Protect this system.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And one of the things I will say, so when I'm going around and I'm walking around the community, I'm talking to residents and stuff, and they're like, what are you doing out here? You're like walking around by yourself. And I'm like, well, I'm just here. Take a walk with me. Let's talk. Let's find out what we can do. And I made a commitment. I worked in housing and community development for 26 years. I started out as what's called a resident initiatives coordinator. And over the last 26 years, I have worked very, very hard to learn everything that I possibly could learn. And there's two things I wanted ever since I was very young. When our house was taken, my father became a housing commissioner. He ended up getting civically involved. And so what that meant to me was all of those commission packets would come to our house. And I'm nosy. So I'm right there trying to find out, what does it say, Dad? And he would let me come sometimes to national conferences and take me. And when I go around and I'm talking to the residents, I say, I'm here now. And there's nothing they can do. And I really do believe what I say, and I do walk what I talk. And what I ask all my residents is, so long as you have my back, I can do anything. I will do whatever it takes. So thank you.
I have a question. Right there.
Yes, ma'am.
Monique, would the changes to the center benefit the residents in that community?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we're really interested in, and I'm telling you guys stuff that you know, keep it a secret, right? It's being recorded. One of the things that we're very interested in, we know that Green Opportunities has recently vacated the space there. And so we're looking at ways that we reimagine housing altogether as a tool for economic equity, right? And so that means that I can't hold people accountable for something that I don't give them a resource in order to achieve. And so one of the things that we're looking at doing is creating a one-stop shop for economic advancement and really looking at that space and saying, what can we do? I want our residents to also understand that before there was really no requirement. Maybe years ago there was, but there's no requirement, and we want to provide you with a higher expectation. I have a higher expectation for you. I know that you can get a job. I know that you can get your education. I know you can pursue ownership of whatever business you're interested in. And so to answer your question, yes, it will continue to benefit the community, but it's also a resource for the entire city because there are children and adults that come from all over to take advantage of those resources. So we want to make sure that it continues to be a place of service and hopefully renovated soon. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, next on the amended agenda is our round table conversation, so we can have some open conversation. All right. I know that the timeline was supposed to be addressed in a part of this, and so I think we should start with that updated project timeline that's in your packet for review.
Okay.
And so your timeline in your packet looks like this. All right, I'll let Christine take it away.
Are there any questions about the timeline?
Can you walk us through it?
Sure. So if you look at page 16, you can see that where we picked up the timeline is an activity number 5, January 2023, where we were proposing to reaffirm the resolution, define reparations, and then as you move further along from activity 6 and 7, that's sort of where we are now, January to August. IFA facilitators continue to lead their work groups in the development and organization of recommendations, and meet with the CRC monthly and meet with the project manager bi-monthly. And this is outdated. We had all recommendations submitted for consideration by May 31st, but of course we want to make sure that we're being flexible. So we've made some just changes for flexibility. As we move into activity 7, looking at September to December, IFA facilitators would continue to work on recommendations with commission members, host meetings with the intention of opening up the process to community members to listen, observe, and participate. Additionally, city and county and CRC members will support partnership events, and so that has been continuing to happen throughout the year. Looking at activity 8, 9, and 10 is what will move us through the remainder of the year, and then also what we're sort of estimating and looking at what we think might work for 2024 as well, leading up to April 2024. So August to September, the project manager will create a feedback process for reviewing the legal backing and guidance to create highly feasible recommendations to guide prioritization. And then that review period would be from August 11th to September 15th, so that IFA leads and commission members can implement what they heard at the retreat, refine recommendations, work on them some more, and hear from our staff and subject matter experts to weigh in on those recommendations. So as we move into activity 9, which is where we'll be starting next month, starting that voting process to start to present the actual draft recommendation proposals and begin to vote on them as a group. And this commission has already passed several recommendations, so we're thinking that this process will mirror that of the recommendations that have been passed previously. And while all of that is happening, my firm is going to be helping to start writing that narrative report, start writing that final report, and making sure that we're hearing from everyone, making sure that we're hearing from everyone involved, including our data team, community members, and feedback. So we are starting to write that final report simultaneously as the recommendations are coming in. And then looking at 2024, Activity number 10, submitting the written report project closeout. The recommendations will be passed by the CRC officially and compiled and presented to the governing bodies and shared with the wider public. Of course, the content of what those recommendation proposals will look like, we don't know right now. There are draft recommendations included in your packet, and there are they were also presented to the group as a whole at the retreat. So at the retreat, IFAs got an opportunity to look at recommendations, speak with one another, talk to one another. So we don't know what that's going to look like just yet, but we know that it's going to be compiled, presented to city and county government. And then so as we move into project FAQs, some of the frequently asked questions that continue to sort of come up when we're talking about how do we create these recommendations and what does the process look like. So recommendations should be fairly broad and not necessarily connected to any particular group or organization or existing initiative that serves a private interest so as to remove any potential conflict of interest, ultimately, and to serve the interests of the wider African American community in Asheville-Buncombe County. We also wanted to highlight that the projects that benefit individual persons or businesses are not eligible. There is a federal law called the Emoluments Clause that prohibits governments from contributing tax dollars to individual benefit. And the reason that I mention that is because the reparation dollars are majority, tax dollars. Also, the issue of the temporary hold for data requests, which we did implement back in June, really helped us to make progress and make leeway in terms of getting more data requests fulfilled and implemented. I've been in conversations with the data team recently where we've learned that they have been actually able to fulfill those requests. So that hold can now be lifted. It really was an informal hold. It really was just to help us from a project management standpoint to go through those existing requests. Community engagement messaging will be key. We are planning to host a community summit in the fall to gain buy-in and feedback on the recommendations. There's an updated anticipated budget consideration. We now know that there's about $5.6 million allocated from the city and the county now, because after July 1st, there was additional funding allocated due to the passing of the city and county budgets. So now that we have more to work with, which is great. And then some CRC recommendations may be considered for funding in upcoming county budgets, so that's why we wanted to include that update. These are just some questions that I still had, and I know that you guys probably still have. What's the anticipated time frame that projects will be implemented once approved? To be determined. And then what is that accountability structure for implementing the recommendations once the commission term is complete? To be determined. So these are things that should be determined and will be determined by this group, however you deem, to decide on that. Next steps. So the next slide says next steps. The IFAs are going to be incorporating feedback from the retreat. The city, county, subject matter experts, the budget team, and members of the legal team will review those draft recommendations for feasibility under local government purview and help to provide some estimated costs as well. And really these are just kind of guidelines and suggestions for how to present your recommendations when you're presenting them to the commission. And then, again, that review period is from August 11th to September 15th. And then the initial time period that we're going to begin to present those recommendations. And again, this group can decide how that's done. Some IFA groups are a little bit, I will say, further along, or they might have more fully formed or might have a really high priority recommendation that they really want to get in front of the group immediately, while other groups might want to wait a little bit longer or have some more time to develop it a bit and to get that buy-in. So that's why, if you go to the next page, that's why we pretty much have staggered it out. And when it comes to agenda setting, I'm definitely open to commission members being a part of agenda setting. The chair and vice chair are a part of that process. So, so that's pretty much where we're at. We want to just make sure that we're using the best use of your time. And, these sort of meeting agendas are flexible. But in terms of project management, it really is going to, I think, help to keep us on track with this April 2024 timeline.
Any questions on the timeline?
Question?
Sir?
My name is Bernard Oliphant. When you address the report that you're giving to the city and the county, will the commission see that report before it goes to them?
Yes.
Can we have a copy of that report before it goes to them?
Yes.
So that we can study it?
Y'all will be instrumental in creating that report.
Yeah, I just had a question. Basically for the general commissioners that are here, just kind of a random poll. If you are comfortable with the timeline, or do you believe we have enough time, or do you believe we need more time? Just out of curiosity, if anybody wanted to show hands, if you believe we have enough time or not, and just hear from people.
More time. I've always felt that timeline imposed. Let me rephrase that. That the timeline is imposed rather than achieved.
So,
I'm sorry, say that, we didn't hear that.
Okay, it feels like the timeline, somebody said, okay, you'll be finished at this date. That didn't take into consideration whether or not we would actually be at a point that we had accomplished what we believe to be a reasonable goal. So therefore, I think the timeline, if it stays hard and fast, that's not fair. We need, it may be 6 months, it may be 2 weeks, but we don't know that. And if we start out right here, right now with, okay, this ends on this date, we're kind of forced into conclusions that maybe we're not comfortable with.
But if we have timelines, it makes the IFAs work towards what we should be doing in our IFAs. We're meeting bi-monthly, so therefore we can possibly get done what we need to get done and not to extend. A lot of us were told that this would be a time frame that we would end, and we committed to that particular time frame. To hold people beyond that time frame may be an inconvenience, and I can only speak for myself because I have commitments afterwards. So to hold someone beyond that point, we need to hold off and see where we're at. I heard Christine say we're flexible in a lot of things that we're doing. I want to continue to be flexible, and I also want us to consider the time frame that we were given by the city and the county.
Any other comments?
I do think the timeline it does feel, I get what you're saying. Like, I mean, we agreed to a specific timeline, but now that the work has actually been started, I do feel like there's still a lot of key implements that we need to discuss to get to a proposal that I feel like is feasible and fair. Like, I don't know if this is the time to actually state all those things, but I mean, I've put in the comments in the feedback section multiple times about defining reparations, and I know that somebody stated that we did that at the retreat. We did not do that at the retreat. So it's like, we still need to talk about the work that we are doing, if it is indeed reparations or not. Two, we have an audit that we essentially we're going to hear for today, but that is a big influence to me as far as the recommendations that we propose, because there's hopefully information that comes from about that is very instrumental in the recommendations and proposals that we are going to actually submit. So I hear both sides. I think that we can strive for this timeline that we have, but I also feel that there's a lot of discussion that it would be instrumental if we could do that during these meetings if we're going to get to a finale in August.
Well, I think a timeline is very important, but I also think the process is important. And sometimes when you get into different process, it takes longer to do things than it would, that you would normally take. So you have to take that in consideration. When we got into the fact that we needed to make these recommendations, health and wellness did, we said, okay, but we had a lot of more things to do before we wanted to do the recommendation. But we were sort of forced into doing that because there was a deadline. I think we have to be careful. We want to do it right, and we want to do it so that it's effective. So
No, keep talking.
I'm sorry.
It wasn't supposed to be.
Oh, I thought the time was up. So I think we should consider the timeline and what's going on. And I'm sure everybody has other things to do and things like that. But we must consider the whole picture.
Yeah, so, okay. So the timeline has been like a hard thing for me because I feel like this process is too important. And it's bigger than the people that's sitting at these tables. And when at the end of the day, once the recommendations are in, it's our reputation, like we are community, we on the ground. They're not gonna come to city council or Buncombe County commissioners, they coming to us. If these recommendations is not supported by community, I don't think we did adequate enough at this point, community engagement and input in the process of these recommendations and how solid they are. Because the worst thing that can happen is we rush these recommendations just to get them out, to meet a deadline, let's just meet the deadline, push them out there. And they not complete, they haven't been vetted by community, there's been no community input outside of a summit that's currently on here in these smaller events with RJC, but like I think that part has to be thorough because we represent a community, we don't represent ourselves sitting at this table. And I feel like we in those areas, we could be doing a little bit more, or we can be strengthening or coming up with a plan. I know we've talked about community engagement, it's a lot of meetings. After meetings and how to do that and what's the limitations and what are our restrictions and what resources are at our disposal to be able to do the type of community engagement we want to do. And I respect of IFAs, but at the same time, it's like we had these timelines. It's still things like, do we develop the budget for our recommendation? There's so many questions on what the actual recommendation needs to have outside of that one page, that sheet, that format. Like, do we submit the budget that we feel is needed in order for our recommendation to be, like, what does that look like? It's still a lot of questions that haven't been answered to this point. For us to have a hard date. And so, like, that's where my uncomfortableness is. It's like, if it's flexible. Yes, this is what we're aiming for, but it's flexible based on where we're at. I felt like we've been rushed. I know in the IFAs I've been attending, we felt like, oh, we got to get them out. Oh, we need a product. This might be more, like, we haven't really had time to process all of it. And a lot of times we don't have the data. Like, data is, with the whole just coming available to some extent, and that's still not all the data that we've requested. That's some extent to where we have to have recommendations rolling and be prepared for April. I just feel like it's too restricting. I feel like I don't want to say set up to fail, but that's how it makes me feel. Like I'm not sure that it's set up to succeed with that hard time deadline because we move at the power of people. We can't move at the power of systems. Like, have deadlines that we want to, like, this is sunshines and rainbows, we will be done by this time. But if not, we have these other options to consider for extending instead of everybody feeling rushed to just push something out and then it don't be as effective as it could have been. I'm sorry. Oh, no, it was sorry.
A timeline is good.
Yeah.
The timeline needs to be developed by commission members in collaboration with community members. If you look at the comments I mean, it was clear, everyone was asking for more time. That's page 6, question 4 and question 5. The responses were consistently more time, more IFA ownership over the process. I think it's there. We just have to kind of collaborate more around doing that. You said something about the audit. That audit is really important, I think, for helping us to establish solidly with evidence what the recommendations will be. And for what I've heard, the audit report will not come out, the full report, until next year, April maybe.
No.
December.
Oh, so this year, December?
No.
So, next year, February. So if it's next year, February, I mean, it looks like we're closing off presentations prior to that. So I would suggest that we open up more recommendations when that audit is complete, because it's really going to look at some of the areas, a lot of the areas that we need to address as a commission. A lot of time we're basing things off of our experiences, which is really important, which I think the evidence will support eventually, but we need to look at the data as well to supplement that. So I'm all for extending the timeline, at least to really incorporate our responses to the audit, which I don't think this timeline anticipates or accounts for.
I just wanted to say that I don't think that there's no way possible we can meet this timeline. You mentioned that there may be options for extension. Do we know what those options are?
I said there should be, but we
Okay.
don't know.
All
Right
right.
now, that's just the timeline, and so that's something that will need to be discussed, and I think the fact that we having this conversation here is going to help to influence how the outcome of that discussion.
But do we have any options in mind? Has that been discussed? If we do not meet this timeline, what happens next?
Right, so one of the conversations at the retreat and in IFAs, throughout this process has been around sustainability and accountability. So how will this body continue to implement and make sure that the ideas and recommendations are being implemented beyond this commission? So does it look like an ad hoc committee? Does it look like a 501c3? Is it going out into the community and creating coalitions to carry the work forward? But as far as having a government appointed process, I think that'll be a conversation that should be had at that level with the government, with the city and county government, and whether or not they would want to keep the commission going beyond the 2-year term.
I got a question. So we're accountability. So what, have we heard anything, and I heard DeWanna mention about data, how we, this is rushing us and everything, and like you said, everybody's like, we feel like we're being pushed, but yet we got half of our data information we need. So what is the process with the data information? We're almost into 24 now, so, and this happened, we started last year, and we're still waiting, so what is the process in getting what we need? Now, granted that we got some stuff, but we haven't got all that we needed.
I'm gonna have to come back to you offline on that, because I don't think we have enough time to get into that, but.
Okay, so like I said, I don't know, granted we got some stuff, yes, but it's the stuff that we really need to finish this either around the timeline, before the timeline, or it's gonna be after.
The goal is to be able to get the data that's needed for the recommendations that are being proposed. So matching the recommendations that are being proposed with the data by the proposed timeline. So that's the goal. But again, I don't think we have enough time today to really get into that, but I would be happy to talk to you more about that.
Ms. Harrison?
Okay, so it sounds to me like we're looking at maybe we do need more time, but I'm not saying that we do. This is my thought. We had the meetings we had the retreat. It was nice to see all the other IFAs mingle with each other. If the commissioners are really serious about meeting some deadlines, why can't you do your meetings jointly with other groups, and let's start putting this together? Put your feet on the ground and get work done. I mean, you keep saying more time. Time is what you make it as a person and a group. Time management is another piece of that. If commissioners will agree to meet with various IFAs that they need to be meeting with to get things done, to do the things that we need to get done, we could get things done. We may not make it to the exact minute of what it is, but what we're doing. But we have got to be able to manage our time. That is the big thing about being a worker or a person that can do things. You have to manage whatever time you have. If you are an IFA that says, I need to work with economic development and housing, economic and housing should be meeting together. You should be talking to each other about meeting together. Criminal justice and child care may say, I need to be doing this, or we need to combine this. Why can't you're doing bi-monthly meetings. One of those meetings can be set aside to meet with another joint IFA. We are dragging something along that is taking forever, that it shouldn't. We know that reparations need to happen. We know what happened to us. We know what we need to do to get it back. We just need to put our foot down and go get it. We can't keep dragging ourselves through this. What they're really expecting is for us to fail. We cannot do that. We have got to push forward on the timeline that we said we were going to do it. And if we do what we're supposed to do, we're all educated people that have managed time through life. Why can't we do it now?
Right. What constitutes a quorum?
What constitutes what?
13.
We have quorum.
We got a quorum.
We got a quorum.
I know we have a quorum, but will there come a point where we don't have a quorum?
No, because we got alternates. I'm just saying that's the reality, that's the purpose of the alternate.
There may become a time that there may become a time that we don't have a quorum.
I see what you're
Hope
saying.
not, but
Participation, participation throughout this process. I think everybody's probably facing burnout, and it's a long haul. I'll just leave it at that.
Keith.
So like about the time management stuff, like I heard what y'all were saying about the audit, and the audit possibly not coming out until next year, a few months before we're slated to end, and I think someone else said that like we would be closed off on our process by the time that comes out, so we wouldn't have any considerations of that. I've been around the block a little bit. I've seen the commissions and boards and such, and just to say it like this, we meet more than anybody ever meets. So like to say that we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, we meet with like most IFAs meet twice a month, and then we have this meeting, and then that doesn't include the sidebars that people are doing on the side. So like, I don't know how much time you can put management you can do beyond that. I will say this though, you had mentioned that the conversation of extension of time has to be done with the local government officials or whatever, and someone else said, do we have options? And nobody said that they had an option. I have an option. It's not to be considered tonight, but it's just a basic option to extend the timeline for at least 2 years. It doesn't have to be considered tonight, but there's an option.
So, while Keith is passing that out, I do want to say this, and I want to make sure that it's on the record. Our IFAs, most IFAs do meet with the other IFAs and cross-pollinate, because I know a lot of IFAs got members that are represented on other IFAs to get this work done and combine our recommendations. So don't let it be the thought that work is not being done. People are working really hard for this process. And I appreciate every last one of y'all because it wouldn't be able to be done without y'all's hard effort. So like time management is always a thing, but I also want to give value to all of the work that is being done. And there's been a lot of work, a lot of conversations, a lot of cross-pollination with the IFAs, and I'm proud of that work. I felt like the retreat was a great starting point for us to be able to dig a little bit deeper into those conversations. And I even was like, well, we can't have one of these once a month instead, so we're going to be working. These meetings are great for public awareness, but I will, my time, I feel like would be much better, impactful and useful in that type of setting where we actually doing work. Because this is great, and I know we have to keep the public informed during this type of process. But at the same time, I felt like, I know the second half of the retreat was amazing, like being able to sit in the groups and ask the questions and start brainstorming different ways to look at our recommendation and the interconnectedness of all of our areas. Because all of it is going to connect us at some point. Every focus area that we have is going to connect at some point. And so like when I say we need more time, it's not to belabor and say we not go put up recommendations. It's to say let's make informed decisions on our recommendation and have community buy-in. Because the worst thing is to get recommendations in front of city council and black people come out like we ain't agreed to that. We don't know what that is. And they show up in it because we haven't engaged them at the extent that we really need to be engaging. We are not the complete voice of the black community. We are representatives of them. And at the end of the day, this process, and whether it succeeds or fails, is going to be on us that's sitting at this table. It's not going to be on the city. It's not going to be on the county. We the ones in these communities every day. We the ones got to live it. It's going to be on us, and I just want us to be able to have all the information so that we educate the community along the process and informing them. This is the recommendations we're trying to, we can do the real work that needs to be done. So when they go to city council, the whole room blank because they want to make sure it gets through. When they go to Buncombe County Commissioners, the whole room is blank because they want to make sure it gets through. Because they believe in this process just as much as we sitting at this table. And I just don't think we had the time and the information to know how to do that effectively. And I just don't want to devalue anybody's work in this process.
Can I interject for just one moment?
Yes.
So when I pass this out, I wanted to say, I'm not asking for anybody to consider this tonight, because I know that's not part of our rules and how we govern this body. You have to wait a little bit, right? So what I'm asking is this. It's an option. Consider it. Just because you ask for more time doesn't mean you're going to use all the time, right? But I would hate to be a freight train rolling into like a brick wall, speeding. Everybody's like with chickens, like their heads cut off, trying to come up with something. And as the chairwoman said, like when we go out into community, nobody's going to ask what the elected officials did. They're going to see you because they know you, and they're going to ask you why you effed up, why you messed up, why you throw us under the bus, why didn't you put more consideration into it. I'm not saying we're going to use all of the time, but you do need to be able to make informed decisions. And if somebody's going to tell us we can't get any more time, then we should be able to vote on it and send it to them and tell them, hey, we need more time. And if they tell us no, then that will be them telling us no, not us telling ourselves we didn't get enough time, because there's never enough time to do everything, but there should always be enough time to do the most important things.
Madam Vice Chair, I'd like to challenge the executive committee to come up with a way that this commission can communicate with community, because these are open meetings, and IFA meetings are open meetings. I would like for us to come up with a way to engage the community. If we're going to be held responsible with the community, I want us to have a way to communicate with that community. So if I can just challenge the executive committee to come up with a plan of how to engage with the community,
then the IFAs and this commission can start doing that immediately. All right.
Mr.
No
Walton,
problem.
I know we got to move on, but can I just state too that while we're talking about challenges, can we also challenge that there's a lot of important topics and discussions that we need to have while we're all together, and I think that the agenda can be used so that we can have these discussions, and I would feel much more comfortable, I think everybody would, if we could start talking about these pieces like the accountability, community engagement, data research, defining reparations. If we could put some of these on the agenda so that for the rest of the meetings that we do have scheduled, and we could discuss them as new, old, whatever business we have, I think that we could make a lot more, we could use time management better to get to where we need to be. So if I think it would be good if when the agenda's coming out, I know some of us respond to emails, some don't, but if we could put those, hey, this is what we've heard about agenda topics, and give people a set time to essentially respond to it and then make the agenda from there, there can't be any confusion or anybody saying, well, we didn't get a chance to share our emphasis in doing that.
So, I think that's a great idea. Actually, me and Dr. Mullins been, having that conversation regularly around the agenda and how important it is to make sure that we as a commission are being able to talk about the topics and things that we need to talk about, as a full commission. And so if that agenda draft, and so one thing that I'm going to propose to the team is that agenda draft be sent out as soon as we have a draft of it and given the commission. So one thing was the issue, responding. And so everybody don't respond. And like that, like we get the phone calls and things like that, but what we need to see is the actual response to it, because it's not just us doing the agenda. We work with a team, with city and county. So it's like all of us that are part of that conversation. And so when an email go out, please respond. Like it's key. Communication is so critical when we want to make these adjustments, but so it don't seem like it's me and Dr. Moss all the time making these, this needs to change, we might need to consider this, because we're hearing the impact from commission members, which we definitely don't want y'all to stop contacting us and talking to us about the different things we value. And we actually use it, and we, trust me, they be hearing us all the time. You know what I mean? Like, maybe we should try this, maybe we should share that. And so with that being said, when there's an email sent out, please respond if you have a comment, so that when we, or changes or edits, so when we get to that position of actually sending out the final, it's reflective of what the interest of this council, this commission is.
Kevin, I'd like to propose for our next meeting that we discuss what reparations is, and that we actually articulate as a commission what our stance is on what that is, versus community upliftment projects. Because reparations and community upliftment projects are two different things. So I think that we should discuss whether we want to do both, whether we want to do one. I think that we haven't clarified what we want to do. Although it's called the Reparations Commission, we know the devil's in the details. So we have to really articulate what we mean, so that the county and the city can make an informed decision. I would also like to propose that we begin to put to a vote, or maybe even put to a vote, this question of a timeline. And then the third thing is, as we're having these discussions, that we have some type of closure to these discussions, that they're not just left open, that we have a voting process to move the thing along. These are three areas that I think if we zero in on, we could kind of move closer to that timeline. We're not reaching the timeline because we're not bringing these discussions to a close.
So, I'm glad that you said that, because it tells us into our next agenda item if there's no more comment on this.
Was that an official proposal that required a vote?
No.
No? Okay, just making sure.
And so, the next item on the agenda is actually the audit. Run that in, and then we will talk about, put some closure to that retreat, and talking about, we are at 7:55. Let me ask now, is it okay with commission members if we are, we end at 8:15, 8:20? Is there an issue with extending the meeting for an additional 15 to 20 minutes? If there is, that's fine. Please raise your hand if you can stay. Let's do it like that, so that I can make sure that we can all be here.
Raise your hand if you can stay.
If you can stay for an additional 15 minutes.
Is that just a quorum?
Yeah, because MZ ain't left. Okay. All right. So with that being said, I'd like to call up the audit firm, the Seaston audit firm.
Yeah, Carter Development.
Carter Development Group.
Hello, good evening. How's everyone doing? Good evening. I'm Dr. Adrian Carter. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here. We're the firm that was selected to conduct the CSHOM audit. The Carter Development Group, we are a research and consultant firm that's been working in inclusive development, inclusive community building, inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion as well for several years. Personally, I have 23 years of experience doing this type of work, including strategic planning, change management, working with government agencies, educational institutions, and nonprofits. And we've done several studies as well, so we are happy to be here and to bring our expertise to the table. Thank you to both the city and the county and to the commission here for having us. I am going to go through what our research, which includes our data collection, data analysis, and our reporting process is going to look like, and in consideration of your time, I'm going to move through the process rather quickly. We do have a team of 10 people who are working on the study. They are broken up into teams of 2. I am joined here by Dr. LaShawna Wiggs, if she can please stand. She is also the project manager on this and the person responsible for the economic development IFA. And each team working on a different IFA will be conducting a study specifically within their area. Our timeline, which is compressed, but we do believe that it is doable, will have us submitting the final report and closing out the project by February of 2024. The way that we have this process set up is to assess very specific metrics, specifically within the city and the county government. So we would be looking at the process, procedures, their outcomes. We're looking at ordinances, policies that is specific to the various IFAs, but how is that process conducted, and what are the outcomes based on what the city and what the county have specific authority over. So we'll be looking at grant funding. In the economic development area, we'll be looking at small business ownership, workforce development. In education, we'll be looking at early childhood development, for example. In the healthcare area, we'll be looking at access to healthcare, analyzing food deserts and healthy food access. In housing, we'll be looking at home ownership rates, housing discrimination, how has home value appreciation been conducted, or how it's grown or depreciated over the years. And in criminal justice, we'll be working with both the sheriff office, and as well as the police department for Asheville. And we'll be looking at what does officer recruitment and onboarding look like, racial disparity in arrest, what does recidivism rates look like, and whatnot. So there are some more metrics that we'll be assessing, but those are just some of the examples that we'll be looking at specifically within the city and the county government. As we go through our data collection process, we're going to also have very specific cohort meetings, is what we're referring to them as. Going to be focus groups. So for example, when we're looking in economic development and we start gathering all of that data, we are going to then have meetings with the department heads, maybe their second person in charge or whoever they have on staff. And we're going to start asking those qualitative questions about, tell me more about your process. What's the outcome, the anticipated outcome that you wanted? What was the actual outcome? How are people being serviced or businesses being serviced? Whatever the category is. And we'll have those conversations to get a very clear understanding of how the process is operating within the department. And we'll use those metrics from the data they give us, the quantitative data, you know, here's a statistic or a percentage of something, of an outcome, and also what does the qualitative data look like, which is when you're telling us about your process, how effective is it actually working? And we'll use all of that information to determine how harm is being assessed. I'm hearing you all talking, a very important part of your conversation has been about how do you define reparations as it is meant for this particular commission. Well, we took a similar approach in how do we define harm in our assessment, which we thought was very important to do. And then we placed that on a scale. What does no harm look like? Slight harm, prevalent harm, substantial harm, and then severe harm. And we've developed these definitions, and each of the IFA on our team, going back to those 10 people that you saw, have also developed a definition for specifically what does it look like for criminal justice, specifically for housing, specifically for economic development. And that is branched out of the harm scale from the general definitions. So we'll be using this scale to make a determination under each metric. We'll give that a number based on our assessment. And that scale would then be converted into a table. So this is just a hypothetical example that we have up here. When we look at home ownership rates, for example, we'll do a comparative study to other cities, and we'll also look at some national data. What's the disparity rate between white ownership of homes versus black ownership of homes, other ethnic groups? We'll learn more about the process. And from all of that information, quantitative and qualitatively, we'll determine, say, hey, you know what, home ownership rates within Buncombe County and within the city of Asheville is operating out of, let's say, slight harm or prevalent harm. And then we'll rope in some recommendations is how do we reduce the harm in that particular area. So these are just two examples of what the harm results table would look like as we finalize the findings and the final report, and then have the correlating recommendations to go along with it. So that's just a quick overview of our process that we'll be doing. Again, specifically focused on the city and the government in the county and their internal processes and how their processes are affecting harm within the community. I know that was a quick run through, but are there any questions? Yes.
Are you accounting for the voice of the community, how these processes impact them?
The scope of this specific work was to look at the city and the county. So not outside into the community. What we're looking at is, so for example, the connection to the community may come in how that particular department is having an effect on the community, but we're looking at what's the process of the department, what's their anticipated outcome, and how does the service that they're rendering actually have an impact on the community. But we're interested in what's their internal process. So we're looking at process procedures. Are they being compliant? We'll be looking at ordinances. Anything that's supposed to be guiding them, we'll be assessing that. Yes?
I have two questions. What's the difference between this and the community needs assessment that's being done by the county? And how many times have you used this study to help a community?
I'm not aware of the first question, so I don't have a response in terms of how that goes. How many times have we done this type of work to help other communities? We've done that for a lot of years. Specifically, the Carter Development Group, we work with universities. We've done assessments and auditing their workforce as well. We've also worked with other towns and their library systems in the town as well to assess what does racial equity issues look like specifically in those particular communities. So that's work that we've been doing for 5 years. Specifically, I've worked with, I'm gonna say urban renewal, but it's a bad word around here. But urban renewal specifically with the Bahamian government and also with the Turks and Caicos. But that was poverty alleviation. That was positive work. We weren't undoing, we weren't committing harm. It was, in fact, urban renewal to protect and to revitalize neighborhoods and communities in the Bahamas as well as the Turks and Caicos. Yes, sir.
The harm assessment now, are you saying that you're using their data, like you're using the government's data, and then you're ranking the harm, or that one is 10%, two is 20%, etc.?
Back up with the first part. Are we ranking?
Yeah, so with the harm assessment scale, you have no harm versus severe harm,
Mm-hmm.
and it's qualitative.
And quantitative.
So what is that? Is it just like a percentage of impact? Like 30% additional means slight harm, 50% additional impact means...
Okay, I understand what you're saying. We're not using the percentage to assess harm on the scale. We're looking at the percentage of the quantitative data just as part of the data collection process from the department. So let's say, for example, we're looking at how many minority businesses are registered and what is the process for registering minority businesses? How do they get access to RFPs that's being published through the procurement process, right? So once we start getting that, that's going to be quantitative data. We have 500 businesses. We send out 300 emails a year. So those are going to be, that's what quantitative would look like. The qualitative would be them saying, this is our process. We're going to ask, well, why do you do it that way? What do you expect to be the outcome? What's been the return of people participating in the process? That's going to be quantitative as well as qualitative as we hear about that information. We'll use that information and then benchmark it against other locales and then make a determination as to how effective is that service working in that particular category or metric that we're assessing. And that's where we will assign a number based on the harm scale.
So in theory, if 2% of black small businesses receive or are awarded an RFP, and you compare that to, say, a city like Portland, that's 5% or whatever, and then you take that data and then your team will then rank that.
Correct, yes. And then we'll determine, hey, that might be, but let's say when we look at it nationally, black businesses are receiving 12% of data, 12% of RFPs and getting access to this amount of capital. Well, that 12% to 2% for the city or the county, right, that changes. That's significant. That might be considered a significant enough change that the team that's doing that research will determine that, well, you know what, that's some prevalent harm that's happening, and this is how we can fix that.
And the team
I'm so sorry. We have to make sure that our public comment period is separate. And so we're going to have public comment at the end. We want to make sure we have time for commission members to interact with our speaker.
Right.
Yes.
The harm is being determined based off a comparison with other locales as opposed to what the people express the harms are?
Both.
How are you determining what the people are expressing the harms to be? Like what data are you pulling from to generate that answer?
The people in this case is going to be the departments.
Yeah, I'm talking about the community members. Are you do you have any room to look at maybe reviews of policies? People who made comments about things that the city or county has done. Do you have any room to look at those? Because that's also part of the data that the city and the county should be collecting, right?
Yes, so one of the questions that we have in the data collection process are looking at what are complaint processes, and I believe there's also the ethic line. And based on what's the data being collected from those processes, we'll be able to examine that feedback and make a determination as well as we make an assessment about the level of harm that's being done. Okay.
Well, it is so nice to meet you, and thank you for the work that you and your team will be doing to aid us in this process.
You're welcome.
So thank you so much. So in your packets, we have the accountability, Reparations Accountability Task Force recommendation that was developed at our retreat. It is there for y'all to review and make comments. Please send your comments to us as we over the next few weeks prior to our next meeting, so that we can talk about it. I think y'all are discussing some forms of this in y'all's IFA groups anyway. So please, this is the one that we actually worked on at the retreat that we all was collectively supporting. So please vet that and review that and let us know any edits, comments, or concerns with that recommendation that will come before us and at our next meeting next month.
We have 4 people.
Is this a recommendation?
No.
And so please check out the stuff that's in your package. You got the housing IFA information and different updates from the different IFA groups. So please make a point to review all of that stuff. And so now we are moving into public comment. And we have 4 people signed up. So we will start with Bill Heath. Is there a Bill Heath here? Okay. Well, Jensen Gelfon?
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you.
And so
Good evening.
For public comment, you have 3 minutes to say your question.
Well, thank you. My name is Jensen Gelfond, and I live in West Asheville. I started getting more interested and involved in equity work after the death of George Floyd and seeing everything that was happening with the tear gassing of citizens and the protests in the summer of 2020. And I just wanted to recognize the fact that reparations are due and that it's time for people like me, people who have white skin, who have the entrenched power in this community, for people to stand up and make sure that their friends, family members, and business associates are know about reparations, are starting to have communications and conversations about reparations, and getting comfortable with the idea before you all make your recommendations. I know that this is a long process. There are a lot of moving parts. I have great respect for all of the work that you all are doing to bring this to the fore and come to a consensus on what's most important in our community in order to bring reparations for Black Asheville. So once again, I feel like Asheville is composed largely, there are some people who might speak out against reparations, but there's a large number of people who would be considered the well-meaning white people who might say good things about reparations, but may not necessarily take action or may do things that are not obvious that might stymie the process. And so I feel like it's incumbent upon me and other white people in Asheville to have heartfelt conversations with the people who matter to us. It's those really intimate conversations that are going to allow folks to start feeling comfortable with reparations. And so the goal is that once you all put your recommendations in front of City Council, there will be a large number of people all across Asheville that are speaking in favor of reparations, and I look forward to being one of those people. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Hardy.
First of all, as always, I give praise to the universe and Most High. The topic of interest here that I present to you today is, and I thank you for having the opportunity to listen because you confirmed what I'm about to say. The integrity of the reparations process. And I heard these things. Forced integration into an inequitable society created with institutional, systemic, and structurally racist provisions that pose a genocidal effect upon the persons and or class of persons unprepared nor equipped or educated en masse to compete in a free private enterprise capitalistic economy. Yes, you're being put in a position to fail. Therefore, I encourage you to listen a little to Dr. Claude Anderson, Reparations and Inappropriate Behavior. That is Dr. Claude Anderson, Reparations and Inappropriate Behavior. Dr. Patricia Rose, Structural Racism and How It Works. Dr. Patricia Rose, Structural Racism and How It Works. And as far as if you are in association with, rumor has it that you're under the banner of the attorneyship of the city. If so, I would encourage you to choose your own attorney and not rely on anyone to dilute, manipulate, undermine, or circumvent the very laws that you seek to change. What we are is a community that has been destroyed, trust has been eroded, therefore cooperation is struggle. And this is what I'm hearing when you come down to your timeline. I would hope that you would, as far as integrity is concerned, I define it as doing the right thing, although no one is looking. And that you will be free and comfortable within yourselves as you continue to do what you do. And I encourage all of you, because it takes all of us in all forms of what we do, continue to do what you do, mindful of that you feel in the end that you have at least given it your best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Priscilla. Robinson.
Good evening. My name is Priscilla Jai Robinson. And many of you know that I started my research on the impact of urban renewal over 14 years ago. So in the process of reading just recently, I want to share. The title is Asheville Reparations Plan Next. And this is from the Judicial Watch, dated January 16th, 2022. The city of Asheville, North Carolina settled our federal civil rights lawsuit after agreeing to remove all racially discriminatory provisions in a city-funded scholarship program. The city also agreed to remove racially discriminatory eligibility provisions in a related program that provides grants to educators. The City Council approved the settlement on January 11th. In October 2021, we filed a lawsuit in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of North Carolina on behalf of a North Carolina citizen group, Western North Carolina Citizens for Equality Incorporated, whose members included high school students who were ineligible for a scholarship program only because they are not Black. Western North Carolina Citizens for Equity Incorporated versus the City of Asheville et al. And it gives the case number. Here's the background. On May 5th, 2021, the City of Asheville entered into an agreement with Asheville City Schools Foundation to establish and administer the City of Asheville Scholarship Fund, According to the agreement, the City of Asheville scholarship is awarded in perpetuity to Black high school students within Asheville City Schools, with special consideration given for Black students pursuing career and education. In July 2020, Asheville City Council unanimously approved what is called a Reparations initiative that provided funding to programs geared toward increasing home ownership and business and career opportunities for Black residents. Now, my question is, if the city has already been sued and the case was settled, how will that impact what you all are doing today? How will that impact the recommendations that you provide to the city? That's a question I wanted to put out there for you to think about. Now tonight now let me go back. A couple of years ago, Attorney Bobo Ferguson, he attended a panel discussion. And there was a gentleman that stood up and said, if you all do anything in pursuit of reparation, which is illegal, we will sue. So now we see a suit has gone forward. Attorney Bobo Ferguson replied, it's not illegal nor discriminatory to go after reparation. It's all about how it is worded. Now, tonight I've heard need, I've heard set up to fail, I've heard you all want to go back to what reparation is and all of that. That's discouraging as far as a community member. But and I'm not saying it's discouraging as far as the commission, but it's more discouraging as far as the city not providing the information that you all request. And I'm going to say this and then I'm going to sit down. And I'm going to piggyback off of what Mr. Hardy said. You all need and should have had your own attorney, your own consultant, bottom line. Because one thing for sure, if you have been requesting information from the city and it was not presented to you, a request for data is it falls under the Freedom of Information Act. An attorney would have known that, and they would have, they're already in violation if you've been keeping your information as far as when you requested and when you got it. So I'm going to say this and I'm going to go. If you have one entity who have filed a lawsuit against the city, maybe that's something the community need to be thinking about. Thank you.
So, that concludes our public comment. Please review the information that's in your packets. And so, thank y'all for staying them additional minutes. And with that being said, I would like to adjourn this meeting. So moved. All right, y'all have a great week. And see y'all later.